there was no time to think about what was going on. There was no time to think, this is a big deal. This is 60,000 people.
Hello, and welcome to another new episode of Live Through That. I'm your host, Mike Hipple, and on this podcast, we'll dig a little deeper into a pivotal moment into the lives of some of my favorite artists from the 80s and 90s. If you've been a regular listener, many thanks for that. And please help spread the word by telling your friends and leaving a review where you're listening. It always helps others find us. This week, our guest is Steve Wynn from the Dream Syndicate. He's here to kick off our fantastic fall season. The Dream Syndicate were part of Los Angeles' Paisley Underground scene that also included folks like the Bangles and the 3 O'Clock. Their debut album from 1982, The Days of Wine and Roses, is considered a classic today and kicked off a long career for Steve and the band. Steve has a new memoir that just came out, I Wouldn't Say It If I Wasn't True, and a new solo record to go with it, Make It Right. Today, he shares with us a story about suddenly being thrust onto a much, much larger stage in the early days of the band.
You know, when I think about the title of your show and about pivotal moments, it's easy to go dark and think of some horrible thing that happened that you overcame, or a time where you hit bottom and then saw the light and recovered from that. But I decided, maybe it's the heat or maybe whatever else. But I don't want to go dark today. I want to go on an upbeat, positive thing. And so, a real pivotal moment in a very tangible way. And I write about this in the book, is when the Dream Syndicate kind of on short notice and almost accidentally headlined the main stage at Roskilde in 1987, at the time, the biggest rock festival in Europe. And how that happened, what that felt like to us, and how that changed my life and the direction of the band and my career. Let me put it this way. We were not the kind of band that would be headlining the main stage at Roskilde to 60,000 people. We were popular. We had a cult following. We had critics liked us. We could do well in a 1,000 capacity club at the time, but that was not our forte. What happened was we were on tour. The Dream Syndicate had started touring. Actually, I have to correct myself. This happened in 1986. I want to get my facts right. But we started touring in Europe in 84. And we were really one of the first, if not the first, of our group of bands for 80s underground independent bands, in which I include bands like, our contemporaries would say REM or the Bangles or Replacement, Husker Du, this kind of 80s college rock, I think they called it at the time. We were sort of the first to blaze the trail and get over to Europe. And it served us well, because by doing that, we built a following in a lot of places right away, and sort of got a lot of attention and press. And that was a decision that serves me well to this day. I tour Europe all the time, and I'm grateful that we're bold enough to boldly go where no band had gone before, to borrow a phrase. But we'd been touring regularly in Europe, and we were on tour in 86, traveling around, and we were down in Italy, where we started doing pretty well. We had a good following there. I think maybe we had a week of shows down there. And on a Thursday, our agent, this is 86, there's no texting, no emails, no cell phones. It just kind of, maybe once a day, your tour manager pulls into a gas station and calls up the agency to see what's going on. And this is what happened. I think for whatever reason, maybe just a daily check-in or who knows what. But fortunately, our tour manager stopped at a payphone, as it were. It's a gas station somewhere in the middle of Italy. And the agent said, "Oh, thank God you called. We've been contacted by Roskilde in Copenhagen, in Denmark, outside of Copenhagen. Big festival. They have a problem. The Cult," and this was at the time a new band. They'd been the Southern Death Cult, and became the Cult, kind of popular. Canceled their headlining slot on the main stage at Roskilde, and we were wondering, can the Dream Syndicate fill in? What? Even as I tell you this story now, I don't understand all the bands they could have called. Maybe because they knew we were on tour. Maybe somebody that just liked us. Maybe, we had played in Copenhagen before, so maybe somebody saw us and liked us. For whatever reason, this person who I've never found out who it was, this genius at this festival, wanted us to go there and be the headliners, or maybe the sacrificial lambs thrown, or the the gladiators thrown to the lions. Who knows what they thought it would be, but or just they had to fill that damn stage, and we could do it. Whatever it was, we immediately canceled our next two shows in Italy, which I hated to do. I don't like canceling shows. I think, when somebody comes to you with a dangling shiny object and says, would you like to go for this shiny object and get rid of that other thing? That generally backfires. I think loyalty and standing by your word is a good thing. But man, oh man, what they were presenting to us was irresistible. Like, yeah, we'll cancel our, two Italian shows and do this thing. Well, all right. So we do that, and I don't now. Bear in mind, in these days, I had no idea what we were being paid for shows, how the money was being spent, logistics, how you booked a flight. Now I know all that stuff. I'm very hands on, and I'm if I ever fail as a musician, I'd be a good travel agent because I generally will book flights for my bands and look after my bandmates, on the road and all that kind of stuff. I've got to know the ropes. At the time, I didn't. So who knows how flights were booked? Who knows how things were made? But it happened. Next thing you know, it's Saturday, and we are raced to an airport in Milan and fly up to Copenhagen. We're on a flight. I think it was a mid-afternoon flight. Milan to Copenhagen is probably a 2-hour flight. And we knew if we caught this, let's say 4 p.m. flight, we could land at 6, get in a car waiting at the airport, drive us to Roskilde, which is an hour drive, straight to the backstage, grab a beer, tune our guitars, and get on stage, which is what happened. We just, we were just kind of dazed by the whole experience. Like, what the hell is going on? There was no time to think about what was going on. There was no time to think, this is a big deal. This is 60,000 people waiting to see the Cult play who have no idea. Once again, no internet, no cell phones, no nothing. These people think they're going to see the Cult from England play a show, and they've been waiting for this, and they're bearded up and drugged up and whatever they got, pumped up to see the band they want to see. Well, we go back and, unfazed, no time to be phased. We're backstage, cracked a couple beers, tune the guitars, as I said, and then said, it's time to get up there and play. Now, when you play a festival, there's so many random things that can happen. You generally, unless you're the Rolling Stones or the Cult maybe, if you're lower on the totem pole, you basically walk on stage before your set, do it. It's called a line check. You strum your guitar, you speak into the microphone to make sure everything's working, and then you hope for the best because you really don't get a sound check. There's not the hour-long sound check you would get at a normal gig. You just get up there, hope the monitor guy is good, hope they've got their sound equipment right, and off you go. And then you find out midway through the first song that your vocals aren't there, or the drums are 10 times as loud as they should be, or whatever else, and you just kind of hope you get through it. Hope you live through this, and and hope for the best. Well, as we are getting ready to go on stage, after strumming the guitars and plugging things in, the MC of the show went on stage, and this is on YouTube. You can probably find this if you look for Dream Syndicate Roskilde 1986. This MC, this wild, fun-loving Danish guy, gets out there and says, "Well, I have news for you all. The Cult have canceled their show. They couldn't come here, but instead, the Dream Syndicate have flown all the way from Italy to entertain you, and they went through great trouble and challenges to be here on stage, and they're going to rock you out tonight." I can't quote him directly. So there we are, and he got the fans on our side.
Are you ready? Are you ready? You want to rock? You want to rock? You want to rock? You want to roll? Okay. Here are they, the brain damaged rock and rollers, directly from Los Angeles, California, the Dream Syndicate.
Now, we proceeded to have not only perfect sound on stage, I mean, the sound you dream of, sound like you're listening to a record. They did a great job. And not only that, and we were in mid-tour form, we probably played the best show we ever played. We just were so comfortable. Again, like I say, we didn't have time to be nervous. We didn't have time to think, what does this mean? We didn't have time to think, that's a lot of people. Bear in mind, up to this point, we've never played to more than 3,000 or 4,000 people. We had opened for REM, we'd opened for U2, maybe 3,000 people on those tours. Maybe we'd been to another festival somewhere. But really, this was not our forte. We weren't a stadium band. For whatever reason, we were on. We clicked. We connected. And people, this is not me in hindsight making this up, went wild. They just loved it. They loved what we were doing. Maybe they were happy that we were there. Maybe we were heroic to them. Maybe we were in good form. Maybe we were just a good band, and I think we were at the time a very good live band. We'd been touring a lot. By the time the show was over, an hour later, and just we felt like we had slayed the dragons, the gladiators had killed the lions. Use whatever metaphor you want. We were heroes, not only in not only in Denmark, not only in Roskilde, not only in the Copenhagen area, but all of Scandinavia. Because at the time, as opposed to now, where it's become more of a more of a dance, EDM type thing with occasional rock bands. At that time, this was the rock tour, the rock festival of Europe. So we left the stage, having gone from a band that could play to 300 or 400 people on a good night in Scandinavia to being kind of rock stars all across Scandinavia. There were people there en masse from Norway, from Sweden, from Denmark, Finland, and probably all around Europe. And they left saying, wow, we love the Dream Syndicate. That would have been enough, just saying, well, that was a great experience. We lived through that. We met this challenge and came out, and believe me, we did some celebrating that night. We were actually, strangely enough, one postscript to the story is that generally these festivals, after the headliner, they'll put on a mop-up band, the band to kind of finish the evening, which is when everybody goes and leaves and whatever else. The band that night was a band called Giant Sand, who had become collaborators and friends, great friends. Hal Gelb, Paula Jean Brown was the bass player, and she later became my bass player on my solo records and tours. But this time at this point in time, we didn't really know them. But they played to about, I'm sad to say, about 1,000 people because the crowd dispersed, the rains were coming in, and they got the dregs of it. But we spent the evening hanging out with them till dawn, celebrating, raising many toasts, kind of everything sinking in, and then back on the plane next morning back to Italy. That could be the end of the story. That could be, well, Mike, I'm telling you about the biggest show I ever played in my life and that it went well. That should be good enough. But that led to really a career for me in Scandinavia that goes on to this day. I really have had a really strong, great, loyal fan following in all the countries I named, and even done things like done scoring for TV shows in Norway for the biggest Norwegian TV show, most streamed TV show ever, the biggest TV show of all time in Norway. I got to do the soundtrack, and that one show led to all this. And that is sort of my live for this story. It's an upbeat one.
The Dream Syndicate. Bye-bye. Thank you.
I wanted to go back a bit to find out how the band got big in Europe in the first place. It seems the record label was mulling over the next steps for the band and offered them some choices.
Yes, I read about them. I guess you saw that in the book because I write about that in there. And yes, maybe the best decision I've ever made. This is not, as you say, 1984, and we've our first album for A&M, our second album overall, Medicine Show, had come out. We'd been on tour with REM, which was a great experience, 8-week tour of the U.S. And things are going pretty well. Maybe not as well as they had hoped, or maybe it was going exactly as they thought. Who knows? But things were going well enough where they said, okay, here's our next step for you guys. We really believe in you guys. We love the band. We're going to offer you a choice. Now, at this point in time, I should point out, I'm essentially the manager of the band. Our manager, who brought us the label, had gone on to greener pastures. He eventually became president of Capitol, a guy named Tim Devine. But he, for whatever reason, he felt like managing the Dream Syndicate wasn't something he wanted to do anymore. So I was kind of the guy, 24 and sitting there across the big oak table from the head of the label. And he's talking to me and treating me like, I've got my manager hat on. And he says, Steve, manager of the Dream Syndicate, not Steve, singer and guitarist of the Dream Syndicate. Steve, manager, I've got a choice for you. We will fund a big budget MTV video. Now, MTV is, of course, at this time, really kicking into high gear. MTV is making and breaking careers. You can be a band that was unknown, like Wall of Voodoo. Our friends Wall of Voodoo in Los Angeles had a great video and became pretty successful from that. That could happen. They said, we can offer a big, and probably, back in those days to make a video was probably $100,000 or something. Now you would make it on your phone and say, well, you know, give me $10 for, a couple for coffees for the crew and we'll be fine. But back then you had to spend some money. It was a big deal. So we will finance this video, or we will finance a tour of Europe, which means they will arrange it. They'll pay for the flights, the hotels, the travel, everything, which would be considerable based on the fact we had never played there before and had no real following. I think the decision took me about 10 seconds. And I said, the tour. And the reason was not because I didn't care about MTV, though I didn't. It wasn't that big a deal to me. I didn't see us as being a glamorous video band. The reason was simply that I had never been to Europe. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't think anybody in the band had. But I know that I never had. I was 24 and I'd been around the US, but I'd never been to Europe. I always wanted to. And I thought, well, this is a way to get over and have a European vacation and maybe see if people like us over there. And it'll be a new thing. And what do I like more? Do I like being a movie star and getting makeup put on my face? Or do I like strumming guitar and rocking out a club audience? And there's no question, that's what I do. And I hadn't lost sight of that. And I said, yeah, send us to Europe. And somehow, and I write about this, it amazes me now because this all happened in a 2-month frame. You want to go to Europe? Great. This is July. We have a tour book starting September. Pack your bags. What, you in 2 months, we're starting a tour. You will book all the clubs, arrange the crew, arrange flights. All right. And they did. And it went great. We went over there. And like I said earlier, we just met as conquering heroes. We were met as not only as the Dream Syndicate, but as the forebearers of this movement people have been hearing about. And I will say, when I would do interviews on the tour, half the questions were, tell me about the Dream Syndicate, tell me about the Days of Wine and Roses, tell me about, blah, blah, blah. The other half were, do you know this band? Do you know that band? Tell us more about what's going on in LA. What's going on in New York? What is this Athens, Georgia I keep hearing about? Things like that. So we were out there in front, and it was really quite a good decision.
As I said earlier in the introduction, their debut album has gone on to be considered a classic. Blender magazine ranked it in their top 100 greatest indie rock records, and Pitchfork gave its 40th anniversary reissue an 8.5. I had heard something about the record being recorded in just 3 days, and I wanted to know how all of that came together.
Yes, and the 3 days is kind of exaggerated because we actually recorded it in one night. We recorded pretty much most of what you hear on that record in one midnight to 8 session in a studio called Quad Tech in the eastern part of Hollywood. At that time, we were on Slash Records, which was, at the time, the label to be on. That was the coolest independent label. They had X and the Blasters and Gun Club and Lydia Lunch and Flesh Eaters and the Misfits. I mean, it was really just a great label, and we were excited to be there. But they were limited in their budget. They said they were. They chose to be with us anyway, and they said, well, we got this studio we use all the time, and we can get great rates if we go at midnight to 8. Like, well, all right. Is there a second choice? No, then we'll take your great rates. And we went for it. Now, of course, at this time, we're 21, 22 years old. So staying up all night is not a big deal. I believe we had good drugs, or at least a lot of coffee. So no big deal. Fine, let's go for it. And we got there at midnight, recorded, and 8 in the morning. We had recorded everything that's on that album except for a few vocals here and there. And I went, got in my car and went to work. That was it. The next night was spent on minimal overdubs, just a little bit of tiny bits of window dressing, a couple vocal replacements. And then the third night we mixed the entire record once again, midnight to 8 in 8 hours. And that's kind of, you would never do that, but that was what we had to do. And I wouldn't change a thing.
When they were completed with the album, did he know that what he had created would be such a classic?
I knew. That was at a time, and you live for times like this where at that time the whole band and we all knew, we all felt, we all were confident that we were just the best band around. And this wasn't a false bravado. This wasn't like, come on, you got to believe in yourself, strong hearts, clear eyes, or whatever the phrase is. It really was, we knew we loved music enough. We were into music, and we knew for what we liked. I can't say that we were the best band if you were a Michael Jackson fan. Maybe we would be. I couldn't say we're the best band if you like Ted Nugent. Maybe we would be. But for our taste in music, for what we liked, we knew nobody was as good as us. And that was a great feeling to have. So fortunately, we went in the studio and we were able to be who we were. And I really credit our producer, Chris D, who's also the lead singer of the Flesh Eaters, who was an A&R man for Slash and who had produced Gun Club just before us. He knew to just put us out there and let us do our thing. He didn't interfere. He made sure everything was working. Mics were working. Sounds were being, he had a good engineer, got good sounds, and, was there to say, keep going, do your thing. And that's no small thing. That's really, I've kind of tried to emulate him as a producer when I produce records, which is just to be a cheerleader for the band, aware of what they do well, and try just to help them be who they know they can be. Not to reinvent them, not to say, no, be more like this other band who's a little bit like you. No, do your thing. I will be your spotter. I'll be the guy there to let you go wild, and I'll be there to catch you in case you go off track. Otherwise, just take the guardrails down and go wild. And he did that with us, and it was great. So by the time we left and heard what we had done, we knew that was the band. Maybe there were a couple things that, at the moment I said, oh, maybe that could have been a better take. But then over the following weeks and months, we knew that was if you would have told me in 1982 that 40 plus years later, I'd be talking about that record that would be reissued over and over, that I'd be touring and playing that record start to finish on stages around the world, I would have said, yeah, that figures. I'm not surprised. No, false modesty. It was at the time a record that was unique to us and was something that we wanted to hear, that we wanted to play, and other people connected with. I've made about 40 albums now, and there are in that bunch maybe 3 or 4 where I can say, yeah, that's exactly as I want it to be. I think I can count 4 of my records where I can say, I wouldn't change a thing. But all the other ones, if I hear them, something's going to bug me. I'm going to like it, but something is going to make me nuts. I'm going to go, give me that one again, please. Days of Wine and Roses is one of the 4 albums I'd say where I got it right. And I can hear it back anytime and say, oh yeah, that's the one.
Steve has just released his memoir, I Wouldn't Say It If It Wasn't True. I was curious how the book came together.
Well, I thought about it over the years just because, and I think, these rock memoirs, which are so common now, weren't as common maybe 10, 15 years ago. There's some great ones out there. Amy Rigby wrote a really good one, and Keith Richards wrote his, and Ian Hunter was one of the first. He did a great one in the 70s, and there were a few here that wasn't so common. But I always, I'm a writer first. I think I'm a pretty good guitarist. I think I'm a singer who's learned how to use his limitations to do what he can do, and I try to be good at it. But I'm a songwriter mostly. And before I was a songwriter, I was a sports writer, and I've always been, that's been my main thing. So the idea of writing a book was appealing because, hey, that's a different way of writing, and I guess I have a story to tell. But I always stopped myself before I did it because I'm pretty busy. I do a lot of records, I tour a lot, and I realized the obvious thing is you can't write a book in 10 minutes. You can write a song in 10 minutes. I wrote many of my favorite songs really in 10 minutes, from the beginning till the new album all the way through. You just can't write a book that quickly. It takes time. So each time I thought I might do it, I was like, yeah, when am I going to do that? Around 10 years ago, a writer for The New Yorker was doing a story on a reissue of the Velvet Underground Loaded. I think it was the 40-year anniversary, if I'm not mistaken. But it was a really great reissue that had come about. His name is Alex Abramovich, a really great journalist and has written some good books too. And Alex said, hey, can you give me a couple quotes from my article about Loaded and what it means to you? Well, me being me, which is, you can see in this interview, kind of wordy and chatty, and also I'm also a pretty quick typist. I knocked out about 2,000 words about Loaded. And he said, wow, this is great. He said, you ought to write a book. And I said, wow, thank you very much. And people said that, and I appreciate it. But yeah, and I had to build a second Empire State Building too, but it's no time for that. But I said, well, thank you. He said, and as a matter of fact, I have an agent, a literary agent, who specializes in rock memoirs, and I want you to meet with him. Like, wow, this is real all of a sudden. So there I am in Midtown in the 30th floor of ICA or whatever, in the big publishing company in New York City. I'm up there in this office, and the guy's saying, well, what we need from you are a couple sample chapters. If you can give me like two chapters, I can shop it around. Like, holy cow. I mean, this is for real. Well, given the fact that I was pretty active, the Dream Syndicate reunited, My other band, the Baseball Project, was very active. I was doing solo shows. I was writing songs. I didn't seize the opportunity the way maybe I should have. I said, I'll get around to that. It took me about 3 years to write those sample chapters. And there were the chapters in the book, one about meeting Alex Chilton. I'm in Memphis. And one was about touring with U2. And those are the two chapters. And I said, okay, sorry it took so long, buddy, but here it is. And he said, oh, thanks, but I'm not doing rock memoirs anymore. But great. I look forward to reading it. I go, so, okay, well, I gave it a shot, and I sort of put it back on the back burner. Well, when the pandemic happened and, when we all had to find things to keep us busy, I found myself with a lot of time on my hands. My wife was Linda Pittman, who's also the drummer in many of my bands. She was spending a lot of time in Vermont with her family. So I was alone in the apartment with strong coffee and good typing skills. And I said, well, let's try writing this book. I'll just see if I can write 500 words a day. Maybe that sounds pretty ambitious. Well, given the fact that nothing else was going on, I started writing about 2,000 to 3,000 words every day and just had a book before I knew it. I had a good chunk of what ended up coming out and stopped. Well, I'd gotten pretty far and I stopped because I started touring again because restrictions were lifted and I was back on the road. I went, no, I'll finish this vanity project someday. But in the meantime, my friend Pat Thomas, who is a writer and has done some great books, Listen Whitey, and books about Jerry Rubin and Allen Ginsberg and plenty of other ones, and also as my A&R man at my label, he said, let me shop your unfinished book around. And I said, knock yourself out, pal. See what you can do. Within a month, he'd had an offer from Jawbone, who in the UK, who said, we want to do it. Can you finish it within 2 months? We'll get it out in time for Christmas. I said, oh my God, I don't think so. But I really kicked it into gear and got it done as quickly as I could. And they are putting it out. There was a really wonderful, quick turnaround, which I'm told is kind of not that common in the book world. So I'm very happy about that.
I always like to ask musicians about their early days and what made them decide to pursue music. And Steve surprised me with his answer and actually played us a song he wrote when he was 9.
Yeah, I had a strong love of music from the time I could first speak and was obsessed with music from, from 4 or 5 years old on. Just listening to the radio all the time, hanging out at record stores is, the little squirt. And I guess at some point I decided, oh, I want to learn to play guitar. And my mother quite kindly got me my first guitar at 8, and I took to it immediately and started playing it all the time, taking lessons. And somehow in my mind, it made sense to write songs. I don't know why. I don't know why it wasn't enough just to strum a G chord and sing Tom Dooley or whatever one would do at that age. But I thought, well, it's time to start writing. I guess, I think the appeal of writing songs and being in a band and making records was this, call it vanity or ego or some better version of that, where I love music and love the idea of placing myself in the company of the things I loved. It's always been like that, even to this day. If I hear a new record by, Wilco or Lana Del Rey or Psychic Temple or all kinds of bands I like, artists I like, and it's great, my first reaction is, I want to do that too. I want to make music that feels the way that music made me feel. And so that's how I felt at 9 years old, I guess. And it kind of was like, well, I like whatever I liked at that age, the Beatles, Creedence, The Who, the Stones, the basic building blocks of music. I like all this stuff. Why not be them? It's a ridiculous thing, but that's probably what motivated me. I can do that too. And I wrote a song called Sing My Blues at age 9. Not a bad song. And I'm probably going to play it on this coming tour because this tour is so much about the book and my life. I think I'm going to play that every night just to kind of see how it stands up in the set. Okay. No one there to walk with us. No one there to talk with us. No one there to sing with us. No one there to cling with us. Hope I remember. No one there to play guitar. No one there from near and far. No one there to wear my shoes. No one there to sing my blues. Sing my blues. Pay my dues. Or watch me lose. Sing my blues. That's a snippet right there. That's the kind of thing I was writing at 9 years old.
Steve has so many projects going on, writing books, his solo work, playing with the Dream Syndicate and the baseball project, among others. How does he manage to fit it all in?
It's funny because I do get credited with being hardworking or prolific or this or that. It's my job, and I like my job. I'm really lucky to have the job I have. I've had this job for 42, 41 years since I went to the boss of Rhino Records, where I was a clerk, and said, I got to quit this $3 an hour job because I think this band might be taking off. So it's 41 years of doing this for a living, and it's a wonderful gig. It's great. I get to make music and write songs, and I'm popular enough where people seem to want, to have me do it, but not so popular that anybody tries to interfere with how I do it. And that's great position to be in. So more stuff, the better. And luckily in these times, in the 80s when I was starting out, there was not as much, it wasn't as common for a musician to have 5 or 6 projects going at the same time. Back then you had to choose your thing and make it count. We were in the go-go, whether it was the go-go Reagan years or whether it was the fact it was, just the 80s in general or MTV or whatever it was, the idea of being kind of a happy dilettante was frowned upon. It's like, go for the brass ring, buddy. This is it. Well, now we're in an era where you can just have big projects, little projects, invisible projects, high profile, weird stuff, right down the middle stuff. And so I like having my crazy little baseball band that's just pure fun. I like having the Dream Syndicate that's more psychedelic than ever and more, more intensely trippy than ever. I like doing my solo shows where I'm basically something between a stand-up comedian and, and a quasi Spalding Gray or Lenny Bruce doing my thing, and they all serve different purposes, and they all stay busy enough where I just can't say no, because what's the alternative? Not doing it.
Did you hear the one about the prodigal son? He found himself alone, far from everyone, carefully serving up a tattered pedigree, as if to say there was a time when that was me. First flush of a mutual attraction.
And that's it for today's episode. Thank you to Steve for being here with us today. His new book, I Wouldn't Say It If It Wasn't True, and new solo record, Make It Right, are both available now. And you just heard a bit of the song Santa Monica from that new record. And a quick reminder that you can buy my book on 80s musicians and where they are today, 80s Redux, and its sequel, Live Through That, on 90s Artist, wherever you buy your books. And again, if you like this show, please leave us a review where you're listening. It always helps. And of course, subscribe so that you'll know when the latest episode comes out. You can also follow me on Threads at Mike Hipple and Facebook at Mike Hipple Photo, all one word. Thanks for listening.